Hey guys, this is Ms. Abercrombie. Welcome to the second video in our series on test-taking strategies. In our first video, we talked about how it's important when you sit down to take a test like the EOG or like the SATs that you'll take in high school, that you're being both a good reader and a good test taker. We said that one of the things that makes someone a good test taker is that they make sure that when they're reading, that their brain is turned on. That when they're sitting down to read a passage, they're checking in with themselves to make sure that they're understanding what they're reading. We said one way to do this that makes it easier on you is to take a longer text and break it up into smaller sections, maybe half a page to a page, so that you have a visual reminder on your paper to stop every so often and make sure that you're understanding what you read. So before we go on to our main lesson for today, let's take a look at the passage that you're going to be responsible for today and go ahead and do this. You should have a passage in front of you called the Unexpected Swimming Lesson. If you'll go ahead and put that on the desk in front of you. Let's take a second now and go ahead and break that up into sections. Usually about half a page is a good amount for everybody to read. If you're feeling a little bit more confident, you might want to take a whole page and just stop at the bottom of every page. But take a second now and pause the video and go ahead and physically separate your paper into sections. You can draw a line across, or you can put a star in the margin, or you can put the word stop, but go ahead and physically separate your text into smaller sections. Okay. One of the reasons we said yesterday that you want to do this, that you want to stop periodically and check in with yourself, is to make sure that you're not wasting a bunch of time and energy staring at a piece of paper and not understanding what you're reading. We've all been there when you read 2 or 3 pages of information and you have absolutely no idea what you've just read. And, you know, when you're just reading for fun or reading for class, it's not a big deal. You can go back and reread. But on the EOG, if you spend 15 minutes sitting there staring at a piece of paper and don't know what you're reading, that can really, really hurt you. Because the thing with these EOGs is they're long and they're difficult and they take a lot of energy. And so if you get yourself into a situation where you're wasting time and energy, chances are by the time you get to the end of that test, you're not going to be doing your best. I can't tell you over the years how many kids I've watched start the test and be super confident and really excited, and they attack that first passage and they're marking their text up and they're crossing out answers and they're so all about it. But by the time they get to the 4th or 5th passage, they're barely going through the motions, bubbling stuff in, praying for that test to be over because they've run out of energy, and for some of them, they've run out of time. These are marathons, not sprints, and you have to make sure that you're saving that energy so you have enough left at the end of the test. We call this working smarter, not harder. It's not about doing every single thing you can do. It's about making sure that at all times you're being smart about the way you work and making sure that you're only doing things that are going to help you on the test. One way to think about this that might help is to ask yourself this question. When you sit down to take one of these reading tests, what's your purpose? What's the goal? Well, first of all, it's not to have fun. Sorry. You know, you have fun when you sit down to read a novel that you're really interested in, but that's not the goal when you're taking a reading test. And it's not even really to learn, like if you were reading a textbook in class. A lot of kids, if I ask them this question, what's the purpose? They'll say, well, the purpose is to pass, or the goal is to get a good score. And that's absolutely true. But how do you do that? What is it that determines whether you get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4? Well, how hard you work and how much time you spend. Well, true. But I mean, literally, what is it that determines this kid got 1 score and this kid got another? It's how many questions you get right? If you get more questions right, you get a higher score. If you get fewer questions right, you get a lower score. So if you think about it in those terms, the goal of taking this test is to get the questions right. The more questions you get right, the higher your score. And that seems super simple, but when you think about it in those terms, it makes it a little bit easier to think about how you need to be spending your time and energy. Because if you think about it this way, your goal is to get the questions right, and you only have so much energy to go around. What do you need to spend your energy doing? You need to spend it focusing only on things that are going to help you answer the questions. And this is where some kids don't quite get it. You don't have to understand every single tiny little detail in every single passage to do well on a test. You have to understand the basic main ideas of a passage, and then you have to remember the specific details that they ask you about in the questions. If you're smart, you can figure out ways to do this and not put forth all that much energy, and that's what we're going to show you how to do today. One way to do this, to keep yourself focused on the questions and to save your energy, is to do what we call a look for list. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's a list of things to look for while you read. So you can either do this at the top of a passage, you can make yourself a little list, or a lot of kids like to use their scratch paper. You know how they give you this piece of random computer paper when you take the reading EOG, and the only thing you'll ever use it for is to draw on when you're done. Math, you use it to work out problems, but on the reading EOG, a lot of kids don't use it for anything. That's a great place to jot down the things that you might want to be looking for while you read, because you can move it from the questions back over to the passage, and you can always have it sitting right there in front of you. But the way this works is basically, before you take a look at the test, take a look at the questions. Before you start reading the passage, see what kinds of questions you're going to be expected to answer. And look at each question and figure out, okay, in order to answer question 42, what information from the text am I going to have to use? Because sometimes the answers to the questions are right there in the text. And even if they're not, a lot of times you have to use a specific piece of information to get the right answer to the question. So, if you can go ahead and find that information and mark it in the text the first time you read, that's one less thing you've got to do. When you go back to answer that question, now you don't have to read half a paragraph or half a page to find the information. You can go back to exactly where you know that information is located. It's going to save you time and it's going to save you energy. Right? Now, the thing you got to keep in mind with this, you can't just skim and scan to find the information. You have to read the whole text, and you have to make sure you understand the text as a whole, because there are questions that ask you about the entire text as one piece, and some of them that are going to come more from inside your head. And if all you're doing is looking for those specific answers, you're not going to have the information you need to be able to do that. So if this is confusing for you right now, don't worry about it. That's okay. Let's take a look at an example and see if that clears it up. So here is a question from the last passage you read, the one about the wave. The question says, in the context of paragraph 5, what is the meaning of unveiled? Well, if I have to answer this question, what specific information am I going to need? Well, I have to know unveiled, right? I'm going to have to physically go back into the text, skim and find the word unveiled, and then read a couple of sentences around it to figure out what that word means in the context of this specific text. Where am I going to find the word unveiled? Look at that. It tells me right there, paragraph 5, right? So I've got a choice here. I can either read the passage first, and then when I get to this question, I can be like, oh, paragraph 5, unveiled. Go back to paragraph 5. Read all of paragraph 5 again to find the word unveiled. Or I can look at this question before I start reading, and I can make a little note for myself. Okay, Ms. Abercrombie, when you get to paragraph 5, find the word unveiled. And when I see the word unveiled as I'm reading, I quickly take my highlighter or I quickly take my pencil and just underline it or circle it or mark it, and I'm done, right? Now, when I go back to answer that question, I don't have to read paragraph 5 again. I just got to go back and find where I marked that word already. Now, very quickly, make sure you understand. The purpose of this is not to answer questions while you read. So as I'm reading through for the first time and I get to paragraph 5, I don't want to stop and go back over to the questions and try to answer it and bubble in the right answer and then go back to reading, because by the time I've done all that, I'm going to forget what I read in those first 5 paragraphs. But if I just mark that information, when I get ready to answer the question, I don't have to spend time searching through stuff I've already read. I can go straight back to where I know the information is located, and I'm going to be able to move on a whole lot faster. Okay, so let's try this out with the passage that you're going to be reading today, the Unexpected Swimming Lesson. There are 8 questions that you have to answer with this passage. Let's take a look and see if there's anything in these questions that we could be going ahead and finding as we read the first time. So the first question, which is a summary of the selection? Well, is there anything there that I can look for specifically to underline or highlight when I read? Not really. This is one of those questions where you have to have an understanding of the text as a whole to be able to answer it. So I need to be paying attention to the whole text, but there's not anything that I need to mark to be able to go back to answer that question. Well, let's take a look at the next one. In paragraph 3, what does the phrase stranded by the tide mean? To answer this question, is there a specific piece of information I'm going to need to be able to go back and look at? Yeah, I'm going to need to go back and look at the phrase stranded by the tide to look at it in the passage to figure out what it means. And where am I going to find that? Paragraph 3. Look at that. They're so nice. They tell me exactly where to look. So on my look for list, and you should have this at the bottom of your notes in your little booklet. Go ahead and be filling this in with me as we go. I can go ahead and add paragraph 3, and I can shorten it to P3, stranded by the tide. So when I get to paragraph 3 when I'm reading today and I see those words stranded by the tide, I don't need to stop. I don't need to do anything. I just need to quickly underline it or quickly highlight it. I might take a second and write a note in the margin about what I think it means, but then I just keep going and keep reading. But when I get to that question when I'm done, all I have to do is go back to paragraph 3 and my answer is going to be right there for me to figure out. Okay, let's look at the next question. In paragraph 4, what is the meaning of the word romp? Well, again, what piece of information am I going to need to figure this out? I'm going to need to know where the word romp is. And where can I find romp? Paragraph 4. They make it so easy sometimes if you know what you're looking for. So add to your list, paragraph 4, romp. Now this next one is a little bit more tricky. In the selection, why does Craig enter the ocean and head for shore? Now, I got no clue who Craig is because I haven't read this yet, but I know at some point in the story, Craig is going to go into the ocean and head back toward the shore. So maybe he's coming from like an island or a dock or something out in the ocean. I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know why he's going to do that, but I know at some point in the story, that's going to happen. He's going to get in the ocean and he's going to go back toward the shore. When I see that happen, I need to make a note because to answer this question, I'm going to have to go back to that specific moment in the text and figure out why he did that. So I can add on my list, Craig goes in ocean toward shore. Right? Pretty simple. Now, I know you didn't think I was going to do all this work for you. You've got 4 more questions here, so take a second and pause the video and see if you can finish up your look for list. In these next 4 questions, is there anything you can be looking for while you read to go ahead and pick out from the text? All right, so here's how I finished off my list, and yours may not be exactly the same of mine, and that's okay. I know that at some point in the story, Craig is going to keep his fears from Matt. He's going to not tell Matt that he's afraid of something. I don't necessarily need to figure out why right now, but I need to know where that happens in the text so I can go back and look at it. In paragraph 8, I need to find the word absorbed. I know that at some point in the story, Matt is going to get frustrated with Craig. Right now, I don't need to worry about figuring out why. I just need to be able to point to where in the story that happens. So when I see Matt getting frustrated with Craig, I need to make a mark or highlight or underline and know, hey, this is where I'm going to be able to find the answer to that question. And then that last question asked me about how the setting influenced things. That's a really big sort of overall question. I can't find the answer to that in the text, but I do have to know what the setting is. So I can go ahead and be thinking as I'm reading about what the setting is. If I know what it is, it's going to be a lot easier for me. It's going to be a lot easier for me to answer why it's important and how it's changing things. Okay? So as you're reading today, you are responsible for trying this out. Just like we've talked about before, you need to give this an honest try at least once. So try it out today, see if this works for you. If you feel like it works, you can use it in the future. If you don't think it works, then you don't have to do it again. As long as you've proven to us that you know how to do this and you've given it an honest try, that's all we're asking. So as you're reading the passage today, don't forget to stop at all the different places where you've broken up your text and summarize. Yesterday we had you summarize on the paper to show that you knew how to do it. From now on, you can do it on the paper, or if it's easier for you to just do it in your head, that's perfectly fine too. Make sure you're looking for the information in your look for list. When you find it, put a mark there, highlight it or underline it or star it. Some people also like on their list, the list itself, not the passage, to cross things off or check them off as they find them. If that's something that helps you, feel free to do that. Make sure that when you find that information, you're not stopping to do anything with it. You're just marking it so you know where to come back to later. And then when you are finished reading and you get to the questions, make sure you're going back to those places where you've marked the text to go back and find the answer as you go. Okay, so you are responsible for reading and answering the questions for the unexpected swimming lesson. Good luck and have fun.